You write, stress is not the enemy of our lives. Paradoxically, it is the key to growth. Tell us more about this, and then also talk to us about what you think is our addiction to stress and how this might be affecting our energy and our ability to perform.
So first of all, when it comes to stress, yeah, we do have a default assumption, which is that it's bad for us. But when you think about it, stress is the only way that we can fuel functional growth. Back to the muscle, back to a bicep. So if you want to get that bicep stronger, the way you do it is you subject it to stress. You actually subject it to enough stress that it causes discomfort. Because what you want to have happen is when that discomfort occurs, you want your nerves to send a message to your brain to provide more muscle fiber in that area. And by doing so, during your recovery, you get stronger. That same principle applies to anything that you're trying to get better at. But the common thread when you're doing it is that you must subject yourself to stress if you want to grow. On the flip side, if you don't give yourself enough stress, if, for example, you have something like carpal tunnel syndrome and you say to yourself, well, it's really hurting, I've been stressing it too much. And then you respond by getting an orthopedist to put it in a cast and then, put your arm with the cast on it in a sling and walk around that way for 3 or 4 weeks. At the end of 4 weeks, they take the cast off, and how are you doing? Well, your muscle has atrophied. You've actually gotten weaker. So the problem can occur when you have too much stress too continuously. It'll cause burnout and breakdown. And it can happen when you have too little stress, in which case you'll get weakness and atrophy. So the trick in life is to balance stress with recovery. We're right back to the same idea, to build a rhythmic relationship between stress and recovery, valuing both for the part they play, but not over-relying on either one. Now, there was a second question you asked me, and I've forgotten what it is.
Yeah, and that is, do we have an addiction to stress? I mean, sometimes it seems that when we are resting, part of the difficulty in resting, part of the difficulty in taking a nap, part of the difficulty in even a vacation is that we get off the drug, so to speak, of constant busyness, constantly being on, and this addiction to stress. Do you believe we have an addiction to stress, and how should we be managing it?
I certainly believe that we're living in a world that's moving at warp speed, and that those of us who are inclined in the direction of the culture, meaning sort of the type A personality, the folks who are listening to this are all very success-oriented. And here's what's easy to have happen. What the core hormones that are identified with stress do, and I'm talking about adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol, is that they arouse the body. They create a sense of excitement and intensity, and that feeling can be addictive. Why? Well, it can be addictive for the same reason that I was talking about earlier, namely that it prompts a dopamine response from the brain, and in its own funny way, it feels pleasurable. And so, yes, we can get addicted to that pleasure, to having that pleasure or that high sense of arousal. When you look underneath it, Darren, when you try to understand what is the nature of this addiction, if you're addicted to stress, it's the same thing that people who are addicted to a drug feel, or addicted to sex feel, or are addicted to alcohol. And that is, we're trying to escape something. We're trying to get away from a pain. And as much as an addiction is about seeking pleasure, once you've actually moved into that addiction and the pleasure begins to diminish and you're chasing that high, the addiction really becomes about avoiding a deeper pain. You don't want to, and the pain is we don't want to face ourselves. We don't want to face our thoughts. Our thoughts scare the living daylights out of us. We think about If you're left to your own devices to sit there and just daydream, we think about bad things. We think about what's wrong with us. We think about the dangers that we're scared may happen. We think about where we fall short. That's our default. Why? Because in psychology, there's a phenomenon known as bad is stronger than good. And that's attributable to an evolutionary instinct. We grew up in the savannah thousands of years ago with a recognition, an instinctive recognition, that the most important thing for us to do was to move away from potential pain, because that was the way we survived. Otherwise, a predator was going to eat us. And the other thing we learned to do was to move toward pleasure. And again, instinctive, because that's the way we were going to reproduce and our genes were going to be passed on to the next generation. And so we've gotten locked into that instinct, and it's where we go. And so when it comes to the modern world, where those problems aren't so immediate, you're in the modern world, your life isn't at threat in every moment, and therefore you needn't go to the most negative or dangerous imagined outcome. We are used to doing it. We are programmed to do it, and it feels lousy. That's the best that we could say it feels. It feels terrifying to allow ourselves to simply think. So we have found 100 ways, one of which is to get addicted to constant movement, speed, using our body's natural speed, those stress hormones, to avoid what we find too painful to face.